Hey guys, Mrs. Talk Techie here, and so I'm still working on Bitmoji, a comprehensive guide. It is like I've mentioned, it is a labor of love, but I'm really excited. I'm nearing the end. I've been jumping back and forth, completing different assignments or resources based on the amount of time I have, right? So I'm currently working on number 5, and it's a beast. But because I make it a beast, number 5 is create a hyperlink classroom. Well, let me just show you a little bit of just kind of a sneak peek of what it entails. It talks about, okay, first, hyperlinks, how do they work, some tips and tricks, but then it's how can we use, now that we've created this Bitmoji classroom, how can we use this hyperlink classroom to facilitate and enhance our teaching and learning, especially with distance learning. So I'm going to be talking about how you can create virtual libraries, how you can make weekly assignments, and the one I want to talk about right now. So I'm taking a chunk from a even bigger chunk. The one I'm going to discuss right now is how to create comprehensive lessons. So let me take you to that slide. So I know I won't give it the amount of time that it requires in the actual comprehensive guide because it is a big undertaking, but I wanted to give it its attention, necessary attention, because I think it is important. So let's talk about lesson delivery when it comes to remote learning. Lesson delivery should include all of the different parts of our lesson cycle. Unfortunately, when it comes to distance learning, we get caught in this cycle of here's information, here's information, here's information, now I'm going to test you. Right? Now we're going to assess you because it's like the easiest thing to do. Here's a link. Here's another link. Here, do this, do that, but never necessarily thinking about the entire lesson cycle. And there's different types of lesson cycle. I know that there's also the 5E model, which I think it's really good, the engage and all those. I'm not really fluent in it, but I know that science uses it quite a bit. But anyways, when it comes to our lesson cycle, we like to do our cue sets, our initial teach, our guided practice, independent practice. We check for understanding throughout, and then give some type of quiz or assessment before we leave the classroom so that we can really see and monitor whether or not, our kids understood the concept. And then finally, our closure. So this is what I created with this type of mini virtual classroom. And it's comprehensive, like everything I do, because that's just me. And here we have, in our district, we do use something called content and language objectives. So if you look at the top left-hand corner, we have the date and what our content is. So the content will be identifying the taxes that were imposed on colonial America. And we talk about language objectives. So language objectives are basically how are our kids going to, quote unquote, I love using this, swirl normally in the classroom. And when we talk about swirl is how are they going to meet all those language domains, speaking, writing, interacting, reading, and listening. And that's what we want our kids to do so that they get the full, again, comprehensive package of teaching and learning in the classroom. So this lesson delivery that I have here, hopefully you're able to see how it encompasses all of those different language domains and the lesson cycle itself. So this is what the kids would be receiving via whatever LMS that you use. And they would click through this. That's the idea of clicking through this and accomplishing each part of our lesson cycle. So the very first thing I like to do, especially when we're in regular ed classroom, right, is start with a cue set. What would be your cue set? What would be your to catch their attention, right? And so I like to call it, let's talk about it. And I like to give them a picture, right? So that they analyze this picture and we start building some background, because in history, the history that I teach, 8th grade history, there's not a lot of background knowledge because they haven't really necessarily been taught the content. So we're building the background right before we're teaching it or as we're teaching it so that when we get to that content, they have some knowledge of it. So here's number 1, and the kids would click on number 1 and it's going to take them to 3 doors. And so you're giving them, when it comes to working on the work, right, 𝙎𝙐𝘽𝙎𝙎, you're giving them that choice. novelty and variety. Let's see, ultimately they're completing the task we want them to, but at least you make it a little fun and engaging. And it says you're about to jump into history, pick a door and see firsthand a historical event of the Revolutionary era. So they get to pick, and each door has a different picture. And so in this case, let's go with picture number 1. And I chose pictures that I know are key and important factors in what I'm teaching. So here, taxation without representation. And so here's my little Bitmoji that says tacos. And tacos is our strategy that analyzes this visual, media that we have here. And at this point, kids should have already practiced this strategy and are aware of and familiar with how to complete it. And so it says complete the taco strategy for the image above. Then click on the Flipgrid logo and recite the summary from the strategy. So think about our swirling, which is our language domains. We're going to have the kids reading right, obviously, this information, but we're going to have them writing down the different components of this image. So when do you think this time period was? How do you know that? What makes you think that, right? What's happening in the image? Are there some textual clues? In this case, it says no Sugar Act, no Tea Act, no Stamp Act. What are some objects you see? And then finally, there's a summary that we want the kids to write out. So they're writing it out. And then we're going to take them to Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is an amazing resource that allows kids to really empower them by giving them a voice. A lot of our kids don't speak up in the classroom, and it's tough for a teacher because you don't want to put that child on the spot, but you know that they need to practice their language domains. Flipgrid is an amazing tool that allows our kids to really give them a voice and empower them. And so this is one way of doing it. So think about all the different language domains. They'll be able to see their peers' work and listen to it as well. And so they're listening. So we're meeting all those language domains. And in some sense, in distance learning, they're interacting by being able to see each other's work. So then the kids would click back on the home button. I do want to show you the other images. So here's the other one. And of course, here's the Boston Tea Party, another one iconic but very historical reference to the causes of the American Revolution. And they would complete this one. So they only have to complete one. So here's door number 3, and this is the Boston Massacre, another important event of prior to the American Revolution. So now we're going to go back, and that was our cue set, right? We started to build some background knowledge before they even knew the content, right? And then for number 2, this is our like I mentioned, this is our best shot, our initial teach, and there's nothing better than us teaching them the content because there might be some mnemonic devices we use or some acronyms. And so you want to teach them firsthand. Edpuzzle is an amazing resource. We can record ourselves. We can walk them through our PowerPoint presentation that maybe we were going to actually use in the classroom. Well, let's use it in distance learning, but let's do a little side-by-side or a picture-in-picture where you're actually teaching that. And if you don't know Edpuzzle, it's amazing because you're able to upload it to that website and you're able to check for understanding and add questions while you're doing your instruction. So check it out, guys. I do have a 5-part, because I'm comprehensive like that, a 5-part series on Edpuzzle. If you go to my YouTube channel, Mrs. Talk Techie, you're able to grab all those. So I recommend you taking a look at those because Edpuzzle is an amazing resource. So moving on. Number 3 would be our guided practice. So how do we do something that's guided that we can do together, quote unquote, in distance learning? And this would be their guided practice. It's literally a graphic organizer. The actual thing I would use in the classroom, I had it digital because I created it, and I just added text boxes here. So the kids would click on, they would not be on present mode, they would click on this and they would start typing out what is the British policy, some description, and some effects of it based on what they learned from Edpuzzle. They could always go back to Edpuzzle, re-listen to the video. So that's the cool thing. How many times in the classroom do kids get to listen to your instruction a second time? Because it's tough. You don't just get it the first time. And it's hard for teachers to say, hey, let's just redo this all over again because we do have timelines. that we need to follow. So this activity is actually a realia activity that is really a really good resource and activity for our English language learners. I mean, for all kids, right? And so this would be the realia, the little items, and I actually would hand them to them, and so that it's tangible, they can touch it, they could say, hey, the first tax imposed was the Sugar Act, and then we had the Stamp Act, and that's just something more interesting and interactive for our kids. But if they can't do that because of distance learning, hey, we have a way to make it happen. We say, we MacGyver it, right? We figure something out. Here, you could add instructions in the presenter's notes. So if you see down here, and on the instructions for the presenter's notes, you can have a website to help facilitate that, or the Edpuzzle link again, just so that they're able to be successful in accomplishing this activity. Next is independent practice. And this is really tough because how many times can kids really actually work independently? It is. So you want to give them something that is going to give them the opportunity to be a little more autonomous with what they do when it comes to their independent practice. Not necessarily a right or wrong, but more of a comprehensive, am I checking, are they understanding the big idea of today's instruction? And let me show you what that is. Their independent practice activity, in my case here, is for them to create their own protest poster. And so I talked to them about how propaganda, when we did our initial teach, how propaganda played a huge role in really gaining momentum against, Britain and their economic policies. And so what I did here is I gave them a little task card. This is my task card on the right-hand side. And I give them instructions. I want you to go to Poster My Wall, which is something that we've used in the past. And I want you to create a protest poster similar to the one I have on your left-hand side. Once you create your protest poster, I want you to save the image and upload it to our Google Classroom. You have the assignment there. Finally, I also want you to go to Flipgrid, and here's your code, and I want you to explain to me, what is your protest poster about? Based on the different grievances that the colonists had, what is your protest poster on, and why did you choose that? And so what this activity does is it really creates a sense of understanding from the kids. Can the teacher just view their protest poster and their video and check for understanding and know whether or not the kids understood the big idea of the lesson? Yes. And Poster My Wall is an amazing resource, guys. And I love taking unconventional apps and using them in the classroom, right? So by unconventional, I mean, it's not necessarily an educational tool, right? Web tool, it's for propaganda. It's for advertising and stuff like that. Well, let's use it in the classroom. And so I actually made one myself, gave them an example so that they have something to base themselves on. So that would be their independent practice. Let's go back to our lesson cycle. And now we're going to check for understanding. Even though we've been doing it throughout this activity, now let's actually check for understanding. And I absolutely love this room. I know it's a little bare, and a lot of my rooms are. I'm more of a simplistic person. So, but anyways, I love this room because the first thing is I'm going to have the kids take that quiz on quizzes. That's all I need them to do. It says take the quiz. Anything below an 80%. If they get below an 80% on this quiz on quizzes, then I am going to have to ask them to go onto my wall of knowledge and click and complete 2 of the things that I have hyperlinked there. So maybe an additional Edpuzzle, which is a little puzzle piece, or maybe some Quizlet cards, right? Flashcards, maybe some Quizlet flashcards. I'm gonna need them to complete 2 of them. And all of these I can check and make sure that they've actually done them. So that's why I put I'm watching, and the kids know that. So 1, I can check what their grade was on quizzes, especially if I link it to my Google Classroom. And all the other ones can also be linked as an assignment on Google Classroom as well. Or there's a means or way to check for participation and success on theirs as well. So I love this room right here because it really does facilitate checking for understanding on whether or not our kids are understanding this lesson that we're trying to deliver to them via distance learning or remote learning. And finally, Closure. This is my Closure classroom. And what I love about Closure is a lot of times in the classroom, we don't get to do it. We don't, because the bell rings or we run out of time. Well, here's an advantage of remote learning and distance learning. You always have time for closure. And that's something that we always miss in our lesson delivery. And it's so crucial and so important because it really ties everything in for our lesson cycle. And so here, what I do is I go back to, okay, guys, this is what we've learned. So you have here, the French and Indian War caused Britain to increase their national debt. If you don't remember, hey, check it out here. This links them to the previous lesson. And then this is to our lesson for that day. Parliament imposed economic policies on British colonists without their consent, causing resentment and outrage. And so we don't have to link anything here because that's where they're at that moment. And then I love to foreshadow so that we can already start building some background for the future lesson. Can you predict what's going to happen between Britain and the colonies? If you'd like to learn more about that, click here. So we start to build that background for our kiddos and that anticipation, and they start to make those predictions which are really important in American history. And so this wraps up our closure and our entire lesson cycle of this instruction. And I'm from Texas, so we have TEKS. So our content are TEKS. So were we successful in accomplishing what our TEK what the expectation of our TEK was. So anyways, guys, I know I rushed through this, but I did want to put this out there because I know when it comes to creating the actual entire resource, I won't be able to give it this much time. I'm probably just going to skim through it, but I'll link this on there so that you know that it's also available. But let me know what you think. I'd love to take more time on it. I just feel so pressured to complete this resource, but I want to give it justice. And I also want to honor your time. If you're taking the time to watch my videos, then I should take the time to make these as intentional and as comprehensive as possible. Let me know what you think. Leave some comments below. I love listening to the comments because that sparks creativity. That gets the juices flowing about other things that I wouldn't see, because we all see things in different perspectives, right? Don't forget to like my videos. I always say that's my affirmation of performance. It's what fuels me, what keeps me going, and lets me know, hey, this is what teachers want to hear and what they want to watch. And finally, if you do subscribe, guys, hit that bell so that when I do upload more content, especially when I upload the final, like, hey, this is how you use this resource, you get notified and you're able to grab that copy of that resource and use it as you wish. No need for credit. You can delete stuff, put your own thing, no worries. All right, guys, have a good one. Thank you for watching.